Josh Jones, I'm gonna call him graduated, even though he doesn't call himself graduated. So I'm pretending Josh graduated last year, and he started this project as his capstone, as a video essay slash PowerPoint presentation that he turned into a video essay, and kind of used the rest of last year to research and record. So if you haven't watched the full essay, it's really good. So tonight he's going to kind of talk about certain points of it to kind of share it in like a format that we can all discuss it. And he would like a lot of participation if possible. So yeah, Josh is coming to us from Texas, and that's my intro. Josh.
Howdy, y'all. Thank you so much for the intro, Shayna. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Brad, for having me as well. Okay, let me open up this PowerPoint. Alrighty. Hopefully the HUD things aren't covering it up too much for y'all.
You're good.
Alrighty, cool. So this is a little something that I'm calling Understanding Diversity in Blockbusters. Uh, Oops, I didn't mean to skip, but we will go with it. So I'm Josh. As you guys, it's what might be obvious to you guys, I'm a Black filmmaker. But I don't think that my Black identity has always been like all that obvious to me. Especially as a very young age, there weren't a lot of role models for me to look up to in media or around me. I always grew up in predominantly white communities, and so I don't really think I associated myself with Blackness. I feel like even times I probably didn't want to be Black. I probably wanted to, see myself as more of the majority. But I think with time, and with, as I guess as the world has become, or as the nation has become more progressive, and more media has been shown, and as I've become older and become more aware of, the world and like what's around us, it's become even more important for me to seek out diverse content and learn about it and figure out I don't know, just like how to make the world better and how to, I guess, create a world where like little Joshes in the future can see themselves in media. One of the ways that I, have come across or study this information is through video essays on YouTube. And so in preparing for my capstone, I knew that I wanted to create a video essay. I didn't really know exactly about what. I had the absolutely amazing privilege of going to Sundance with Syracuse last year in January. And at that time, I met a lot of Black filmmakers. And I went, actually, I was invited to this Black lounge. I was surrounded by just a lot of like Black people. And it made me feel confident in telling a story about diversity and in Blockbusters specifically, because those are the big movies that all of us are watching that everyone's always talking about. And so I really just wanted to um, form a little space for us to talk about a lot of these different elements that are on my mind. A lot of them are things I wasn't able to get into in the video. I'm very nervous if y'all can't tell. So what's it called? I'm gonna try to open up this space for a lot of conversation, asking y'all a lot of questions, trying to not hear my voice all that often. But for now, to not hear my voice for a little bit, I'm gonna let you all listen to me again in my video. Okay. So this is gonna be a little section. What's it called? I'm introducing diverse contemporary films and showing how a beloved franchise can deserve praise and some critique. Let's jump into it. Oops. Hold on, I have to mute myself.
I don't think you shared. Yeah.
You can reshare audio.
Sorry about that. I think it should work now, y'all.
These groups of people, because for some underrepresented communities, there's been pseudo-renaissances, an evident push for more diverse stories. Certain identities have been fast to receive this treatment. Black people, women, and AAPI folks have seen an increased amount of positive representation on screen. And notably, some of these films have entered the cultural zeitgeist as defining pieces of media. But I find it a pseudo-renaissances, one, because of the drop in depictions that we've seen recently, and two, because we still see depictions of marginalized characters that reinforce the ideas that have held them down since Hollywood has existed. Despite not being blatant, they're so harmful. A pitch-perfect example of a character who exists at this intersection for being defining and polarizing is this defining shot, set as the climax of the bombastic first trailer of Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, was a cultural moment. No longer was the galaxy defined solely by the perspective of white people. For as genre-defining, revolutionary, and epic as Star Wars is, it's low-key problematic at times. Leia in the studded swimsuit, Lando the suave, swindling person of color who, mind you, betrays our white protagonist, and Jar Jar Binks' similarities to black minstrels from his cartoony movements and dialect. Even if you rightfully love characters like Princess Leia and Lando for their iconicity to science fiction lore, or even just their excellent performances, it's okay to acknowledge that some parts of their portrayals leave a bad taste in your mouth. Recognizing Star Wars' old misgivings doesn't even make the characters or films worse in hindsight. It's just the Jedi way. Also, the first 2 acts of Return of the Jedi do that on its own.
What's going on?
I don't know.
Toxicity is nothing unique for massive fandoms with legacy characters.
Half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
Who's scruffy looking?
James Bond, Marvel and DC superheroes, and Disney princesses are just a few multi-iterative characters where casting decisions and rumors about protagonists being a POC has sparked online outrage. Star Wars is likely at the top of the list of franchises certain people are hatefully defensive over, and the outrage illustrates the problem. Film as an artistic media is relatively young, not far removed from harmful caricatures initially used to satirize, belittle, and overlook the lived experiences of POC. Depictions morph from overtly racist to shallow stereotypes to where we are today, able to be the main characters of stories. POC protagonists have often been used to boldly stand against oppressive narratives, but not all are written equally. These characters are frequently placed in supporting roles to the white lead, and in the context of an ensemble, as an unfortunate token or singly defined person of color, usually black. That stops the diversity from looking completely unrealistic. Even more unfortunate is when characters are written to purely, and most likely poorly, represent their cultural identity.
It's always good to have an extra body, just in case one of us gets kidnapped for ransom, is turned into a shipping container, and is made to eat only leaves and gas receipts.
Though Star Wars' casting of John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, and Daisy Ridley, similar sentiments go for women, but we'll get there, was met with some vitriol, post displaying the online support, cosplay, fan art, everything under those moons of Tatooine, made it emphatically clear that people were willing, ready to see these characters. Because more than ever, they looked like us. I always had a connection to Finn. As a black man myself, after the series' middling use of darker skinned heroes in the past, having a black dude front and center, looking powerful and badass with a lightsaber was transformative. I don't know if any celebrities want this to be their praise, but watching The Force Awakens projected on a theater wall finally made me comfortable with having a big black nose. Here's my face smushed with John Boyega's that I made for my VFX class. We really are well oxygenated fellows. It wasn't a thought that I had during the trailers or build up for this movie either, but as I watched the movie, I saw my nose on that black boy holding a lightsaber. For a second, those memories of me playing lightsabers with my dad weren't just a fantasy. But with later films, some underrepresented communities,
Alrighty. So I go in on the video to kind of talk about stereotypes and tropes that we see for not only POC, but for also women and for queer people. What's it called? I think a lot of times diversity can be mixed up for just being Black people. So I want to make sure that we don't just keep it under those, terms and conversations. It definitely is easier for me because that's my, experience, my identity to talk about. And so I think that's probably going to be where I come from a lot, but I do try to include a lot of examples of other people. And I would also love if people included their own, like personal anecdotes, with not. But I don't want to focus on tropes for this talk. I feel like that's overly talked about in a lot of diversity meetings, and a lot of times we often don't know where to go from past that point. And so I kind of want to take an overarching look at the industry and some of the trends, and try to talk about some of the moves that we collectively think could create better stories. So the UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report made up a huge part of my research and for my video essay. This graph really is a little confusing for me to read. It's really not that helpful for me, but it does kind of give you a brief overview of how minorities, women, and disabled people are seen less or do not have as many spots, whether that be in front of the camera or behind the camera, as white males often do with who are able-bodied. What is a little clearer to look at are these graphs right here, which show a little timeline of this is lead actor race. You see the minority at the bottom at 21.6% this past in 2022, and that's going to be where most of all of these information is going to be from, because 2023 most of that stuff information is going to be coming out later this year. We see it again here for lead actor for genders. The USC Annenberg also has a lot of really interesting information about all this. What's it called? I found that they focused a lot more on, not focused more on women, but I guess highlighted a lot more of that information. And then here we even see some about queer people. There definitely still are more present in roles nowadays, but in comparison to the 38,000 speaking characters in 900 films, it's truly not that many. And then towards the bottom, you also see some of the intersectionality of these identities. You see how someone you see how race can interact with gender, and how there are very few women of color who have director roles or writer roles. A lot of this is in direct parity to to streaming services, where we see an immense more representation of diverse individuals, both behind the camera and in front of the camera. And what we also see is with more diverse leadership, more diverse directors and writers behind projects, it's going to increase the amount of going to increase the amount of cast and crew who are also diverse. But at this point, I do want to open up the conversation. What maybe are some drawbacks to, I guess, seeing so much diversity only in streaming as opposed to box office or in theaters? Ryan? Yeah, I'm gonna close this too, and people can just jump in too.
I feel as if being BIPOC and also working in the film industry, or attempting to as a student, having a bunch of our stories switch to streaming is really good. Don't get me wrong, but it also kind of feels as if we're being pushed aside to the very deeps of the internet, where we don't really get much promotional or much opportunities outside of that. A good example of a film that I wish got more promotion and even sent to theaters, because let's just say this, America is not really taking the COVID-19 epidemic really seriously, and they're like, let's just push the economy, let's push everyone outside, let's push them to get COVID even more. Even in IC, it's really ridiculous. I don't like it when people don't wear their mask unless they're in a space where there's one or two of them. Wendell and Wild. I think that's what the film is called. It was an animated movie about a black punk female who lost their parents in a car accident, and now they live in this all girls reformatory school. And it was a great animated film. I believe it got nominated, but it didn't win an award in the big Academy Award winning scope. But the fact that a film like that was so revolutionary, especially on Twitter and other social medias, but it didn't get that whole big screen look, because it kind of had that Tim Burton look to it, that Caroline look to it. And that film didn't get the appearance onto movie theaters as well as all these others is kind of ridiculous. And then, I don't know, you don't really see people still talking about Wendell and Wild. It's kind of like a 2-month thing. And that's how most BIPOC animated films kind of are. You get their 2 months of shine, a couple of fan art, and then it goes back into streaming. And then sooner or later, it gets kicked off of streaming because not enough time is spent on it on Netflix, and they have to put out the newest season of Stranger Things. No offense to all the Stranger Things, but I don't see the hype sometimes.
No, I totally agree. That's awesome. I think you hit on a lot of the different ideas that I was thinking about. There's just so much that gets dumped onto streaming services as distributors, they buy a lot of products and they can give it to their vast audiences because we're all kind of into our niches. We like our specific things. And so we're not going to see, we're not all going to watch the same thing on streaming. Whereas, you know, the box office kind of curates what we're all talking about. Does anyone else have any other thoughts or ideas? Yeah, Miles.
Yeah, I think to your original question too, just the thought that these movies making it to streaming but not making it to the big screen. I think I mean, not speaking from personal experience, but I figure there's a big deal of wanting to see yourself represented on the big screen and this disparity in our minds of what the big screen means nowadays, especially with theaters post-COVID and everything. It almost feels like the theaters is like the elite, like the best movies of the best, or that's the hope, right? I mean, that's the idea that we put in our minds, and I feel like it can build this disparity in our heads of, if only a certain group are in the theaters, right? It draws that, again, I don't deal with that personal experience myself, but I figure that can be a confusing feeling. And as Ryan had mentioned, it makes you feel sidelined, I would figure. So it's definitely, that's a good point.
No, totally. Thank you so much for, I guess, like speaking upon like, I guess, like your identity and how you like, view these issues. Because I mean, I think that's also, a super important thing. I think how we all relate to one another. I think we all have different identities, and even though some are, a majority, I think all of us have, a space to speak on and have and impact each other and have, new ideas that we can bring about. What's it called? And I think that on top of what you were saying, and blockbusters are the ones that go into theaters or typically have these huge financial backings behind them. They tell these like grand epic stories, and this where like the visuals can go crazy and whatnot. And it can be, it can feel I guess a bit more alienating, I guess, if you're only seeing stories that are about like a Black person who is struggling or impoverished, who, as opposed to someone who might be able to be a superhero and, go live out their dreams. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything that we want to talk about before we move forward?
I just wanted to ask Ryan about the animation you were talking about. Wasn't that backed by like a huge producer? I remember like hearing something about that, and then it felt like
It was backed by some of the teams that worked with Tim Burton films,
Yeah.
if I'm right. But the reason that a lot of it sparked a lot of popularity was because Tim Burton publicly said that having Black characters in his film was not
yeah.
of his aesthetic. And I think people can take it they could take it two different ways. It could be one that he's not attempting to do it, or two, he never took the experience to try to write them. I like to find a middle point that one, he never took the time to find it, which doesn't mean that he's a racist person, maybe more the lines of ignorant. But again, this is something that he'll have to learn. So a lot of people took backing of it that worked with Tim Burton, so it had like that backing from Netflix and others. But I feel as if my point still stands with the fact that even though that had a big backing in comparison to other animated movies like to go on the streaming, I still feel as if, as a viewer that is watching this film, it still deserved a blockbuster seat, at least. It did get nominated for awards. I'm very proud of the project, but I still feel as if it deserved that spot.
Absolutely. And so this is Wendell and Wild, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's directed by the Coraline and Nightmare Before Christmas director.
And I think for acting they had Jordan Peele as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. So huge names. Yeah, now you mention it. That was something I expected to really blow up, and it felt like it kind of just sat on streaming and kind of fizzled, where it should have had a theatrical release given its profile.
And it was PG-13. It was good diversified. I feel like it should have been around the same spot as Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Although I think Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is like pinnacle for animation that year. But it would have been nice if it got around like the similar spot and look of it. It was, let's see, production companies, Monkey Paw Productions and Netflix Animation.
Yeah. What's it called? Yeah, I think that also goes to a lot of just how much animation is kind of looked down upon in the film world, and people don't really talk about it or cherish it all that much. I haven't seen any of these films yet. I really want to. What's it called? Now that you've spoken about it. But also Nimona is one that comes to mind. I know that deals with a lot of like queer people, and I think that got nominated, but I don't really know how many people have talked about it.
Syracuse alumni worked on that.
Karen.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
don't know that.
Well, I work for the company that did some effects work. I didn't do any direct work on Wendell and Wild, but when I saw their reel, I was like, ooh, now I need to check out the full film. And it was a really good film, so it's kind of unfortunate that it fell under the radar after time went on.
Well, thank you guys. And I guess this is going to show us another like clear example of how streaming gets closer to real life diversity, or the numbers are a bit closer aligned to like real life population numbers. To take us out of as the dire stats, here are some more, I guess, positives, some diversity wins. What's it called? Ryan was talking about COVID a lot. What's it called? POC definitely were a huge push out of COVID. This data has been on a trend for the past 3 years. But in 2022, 6 out of 10 of the top grossing films, POC made up the highest majority for the opening weekend sales for those. So POC are coming to the theaters in droves and bringing it back to life. Audiences prefer diverse stories. What's it called? Films with the 31 to 40% minority cast had the highest median global box office according to UCLA. And then what's it called? And then casts that were less than 11% were the poorest performers for the box office medians. On top of that, kids also really connect to diverse stories. Common Sense Media did a study speaking about how kids who saw stereotypical portrayals of their identity saw lower self-esteem, lower community values, and also like less aspirations for the future. Whereas in comparison, they saw Black girls who saw Black TV characters, and they had more positive feelings about their status and their appearance and their happiness. And so this all kind of goes to talking about like how we need to really push forward with stories for all people to watch, and that all people are, I guess, drawn to these kind of stories. I put some movies that I've really connected with. Not necessarily personally. I guess the only one really personally would be Across the Spider-Verse. I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and seeing him as represented as a Black person is definitely made me feel very empowered to seek out my dreams and do different things. What's it called? Sound of Metal I really loved for its depiction of deafness. The sound design of that movie is amazing, and Booksmart is a really interesting movie that's all kind of about like diversity and accepting people for the differences, and recognizing that we may be a little bit more similar than we all think. I know that we did talk a little bit about movies that we resonated with. Does anyone else have a movie that they maybe connect with? It doesn't have to be with their personal identifiers, really, but yeah, Zach.
Hi, I'm gonna talk a little lower because I'm in the library, and so I don't want to be like too. But I remember when I was in high school, I think it was my senior year of high school. The Watchmen TV show came out, and I thought the comic was pretty good and stuff, but I remember that being an extremely like inspirational and eye-opening sort of story for me to see. It covers a lot of ground in really interesting and inventive ways in terms of racial identities in America and like systemic racism, and it covers a lot of historical um events, but then sort of portrays them from points of view that I'd never seen before. But when it was first released, it's still one of my favorite shows and probably one of my favorite like things I've ever seen. But when it first came out, it got like I remember it coming out and it got like a 5 out of 10 on IMDb or something. And I was like, I read the review and I was like, am I wrong? Like, I thought this was amazing. What did people not like? And over time, it's become an 8.1 out of 10 on IMDb, I think. But I saw it as it was coming out every week, and every week I would check the reviews, and it was slowly raising because I think a lot of people slammed it because the original book is extremely white, and it is a clever story, but also, um, it deals with the war in Vietnam from like an extremely white perspective, an extremely American centric perspective, whereas the TV show, um, really kind of problematizes the original source content in really interesting ways. And people didn't like that because they were so used to seeing this extremely white revisionist superhero story, because it's always lauded for being revisionist, but it's like a revision of the white male superhero. It's not like a revision of superhero genre in general. Whereas the Watchmen show, the main character is a black woman, which is like a complete reversal of the traditional like Superman story. So um I just wanted to share that and recommend to everyone here, especially as, assuming that most of us don't like superheroes a lot here, coming to like a, blockbuster discussion. I think that show is extremely important and not talked about nearly enough. I think it's like one of the best shows ever. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, totally. Thank you for sharing. What's it called? I would like to get into I guess remakes and sequels in the next coming slide. But on top of that, it is really interesting to think about how something like Watchmen, which is supposed to be kind of this commentary, can in its new iteration be a further a commentary on top of that, and on how the prior work failed. I know that also happened in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I don't really want to spoil that for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it definitely plays a lot with I guess gender roles in relationships and I guess independence and standing up for yourself. And I definitely think that that's what's it called? How media can twist our conceptions on that. It's definitely very interesting. Does anyone else have any other examples? Anything else they want to talk about? Alrighty.
I think Melise put one in the chat, but
Oh, really? Oh, I can't. Oh, sorry, I don't see the chat. Let me have this opened up.
she put past lives.
Oh, yes. I did. I really like that. Would you want to speak more about it, Melise? You also certainly don't have to.
Yeah, of course. I mean, past life, even though it was about like Korean actor and actress, but I kind of related with the actress and understand why she did what she did. You know, if you have watched it, I'm not sure if you have watched it. She just she's moved from Korea to Canada, and then she wanted to migrate from Canada to the US and trying to get a green card, and still think about and miss her childhood love life, but she married an American. I think she loved her American husband, but also she wanna get a green card. Yeah, so I mean, I don't totally love the movie, but I related with the actress and her decision. Yeah.
No, I definitely think that Past Lives is a very emotional and grounded film. I think that even though it deals a lot with I forget what the cultural idea of past lives is in the movie, it definitely it does a really good job of explaining it to you so that regardless of what your background is, you can understand the culture and the different perspectives and the reason why they view the life the way that they do. And I think that it can give us a different appreciation for how we can all view love. Let's see if I can get back to this. I do find it very, so what's it called? One of the things that we have talked a lot about non-blockbusters, which I think is interesting. Because what's it called? I feel like I'm very critical of this current studio system and how the films have been coming out from that, and especially the films that are marketed to be quote unquote diverse. Does anyone, I guess, on like before I share anything, does anyone have any patterns within the studio system that they've noticed that what's it called is counterintuitive for the diversity movement? Ryan, yeah.
I think one of the things that a lot of studios are not taking into account is, especially with BIPOC and woman X, how whichever, I'm trying to find like the political way of like the right way of saying it, whichever, but it's the fact that there's a difference between including a character that is BIPOC or a woman or a woman identified, and making them part of the story versus adding them just to add them because you want to feel diverse and breaking the glass ceiling. There are some that do both, but one will always outweigh the other. A good example is Barbie. I love Barbie. Barbie's fun. I'm taking a class in IC about Barbie. Shout out Dr. Steele and Chrissy Cass. But the film still caters to a male gaze sort of look, even with his posters. Ken as a character does have his creepy moments, but it's for somewhat of a good reason, but it still needs to be spoken about. Uh, it's very keen focus on white feminism, which doesn't take time to go over different feminisms and make Barbie into like a beautiful land for everyone. Where if we step out of it, we know as viewers that are of different kinds of people besides white and cis hetero that it's a little bit different. Although, I mean, that's the purpose of fiction. You kind of want to zone out. But it feels as if sometimes with Barbie kind of plays safe instead of trying to step out a bit. Same thing with Little Mermaid. Play safe, follow the original story that was made in the 90s, and don't go far. And again, I'm probably going to see both of these. I didn't see the Marvels, so I can't say anything about it, but I'm probably going to see these two films very differently than other people because I'm a Black, non-binary, male leading viewer, and my gaze of how I see things is going to be very different from all of y'all's, based on intersectionality. But I feel as if sometimes we're not making characters that are there because their identity is also part of it, and their identity needs more than just their stereotypes. It's more of like we're just adding them there to add them there, which can go into a whole different discussion debate. But again, that's just me rambling.
No, I think those are some. No, I think those are some very good points. I would definitely get more into Barbie. I have a what's it called? A video essay that I'm going to share with y'all about Barbie. But I think something. I mean, that definitely came to me with the original, I guess, announcement of the Little Mermaid. I definitely had some misgivings about the idea because it seems like you're just slotting in Blackness into originally white role to try and you know, bolster it for the marketing. But I think it really it really did. It seemed to connect with young individuals. But I think the problem isn't the diversity, but the problem is the storytelling and the lack of creativity and innovation that we're getting from from a lot of these studio stories. A lot of them are pretty formulaic, and you feature characters who have to break past some representation of something that is beating them down, like Wonder Woman and the Black Widow movie. I talk about this in my video essay. Deal with these superheroes fighting against this big male villain at the very end, and it's all kind of this an analogy for the patriarchy, which are obviously very important stories to be telling. But when those are the only stories that we see and the only stories that we're telling, I think that we limit the issues that we can have from from different genders. Moreover, I think we see a lot of green lighting of the same projects over and over again. I have this quote from the Mattel CEO down at the bottom: "Successful movies lend themselves to more movies." And I don't know if you guys know, but 14 movies are currently in production from Mattel Studios. So we see the success of Barbie not introducing more unique stories, but more of samey stories. I think that it's probably in a different what's it called, in comparison or in contrast to filmmakers like Jordan Peele and Greta Gerwig, who I guess started as indie but are now pushing more towards blockbuster films and success. And we even see that with independent studios as well, like A24 is thinking about making going more into IP management and like action bigger stories. So I think that really brings us to an interesting place of do we think that we're going to see more diluted stories about diverse characters, or do you think that this is going to be able to open up the opportunity for diverse people to see themselves in grander stories, I guess, pushed by more independent minds? I don't know if I phrased that as a question, but that was supposed to be a question. I apologize. Yeah, Zach.
I think the opportunity is totally there. But I think it's more of an issue of studios, in quotes, like allowing certain things to, like get by. I think a lot of people like I admittedly have not seen actually, but I've seen Jordan Peele's movies, and he's extremely aware of like film as a medium and incorporates that into his movies a lot. And so it's these filmmakers are all like totally capable of making things that are much more transgressive, but I mean, again, social um constructions of cinema. But I think that studios are much happier playing the safer route and making very simple narratives that are more tokenism than actually engaging with what they could be engaging with.
Yeah, just to kind of riff off of that too, I think you see that trend in we're suffering kind of superhero blockbuster fatigue, but in the seeking of international markets, trying to kind of dumb down stories too. I feel that studios at a certain like threshold of production cost really want nothing more than to play it safe, not only for American audiences, but all these different international audiences now. So I think we're going to see it kind of both ways, where you'll see more interesting content through streaming and through indie studios, like you mentioned, A24. But I see the kind of play it safe route as probably going to be still common for very large budget films.
I also wanted to add that I think that there's also a disparity between changing the form and changing the content. I think that it's easier for studios to simply like they can add representation, but the form of these films remains very consistent. The narrative structure, I don't see a lot of films that divert from a very, very classic narrative structure. And I think that that is also hindering like depth and profoundness to some of these films that are more inclusionary, but they lack the ability to actually change the story in any considerable way. They'll change the characters, but the story itself, whether it's just like especially in superhero movies, I mean, they're like you can I just see a lack of like willingness to actually get more experimental with story structure, and in that way to be more profound in like the film itself, to not like I think Jordan Peele makes films that like are accepted more because he does this thing where he'll make genre films that where the content is very different than what we're used to, but the form is familiar enough that it gets by the censors, so to speak. Whereas, and I think that's the kind of subversion that is acceptable to Hollywood studios. They'll accept like superficial differences, but they won't accept like really narrative differences. And I think that the level of subversion allowed is to kind of is to change content, but to keep the form familiar enough to audiences that it'll sell. And I personally would just like to see much more of a experimentation in form. And I just don't think that's something that I think that is very, very, very not allowed to change, even to have like I don't know, an ending that is ambiguous, like to a film. I mean, these things are just not acceptable. So that's something that and even when I was, I mean, I went to film school, and I think that even then it was this story structure thing is just like nailed into our heads. And I would really like to see some divergence from that. And I think with that will come something that feels less superficial. Yeah.
The contrast between studio films and independent and international films is often like really marked just because of that. And this adherence to the monomyth idea too is so like it's an interpretation of global myths, but it is a very Western perspective that's been proven as a moneymaker, and they really are scared to deviate from that. You can tell. I agree, Jacob, that it's really limiting to the kind of stories they can tell.
No, thank you. That was an amazing conversation. I was really very, very interested in that. I definitely, what's it called? One of the things that I was thinking about before this was that I definitely think that, especially Jordan Peele uses genre to sneak in, I guess his themes of diversity and of blackness and into something I guess that's digestible for everyone, so that everyone can understand it. And I feel like genre and breaking the genre conventions has definitely been or I guess mixing genres has been kind of the way that a lot of people have been trying to differentiate themselves within the film space. But then, we see kind of examples of like Candyman and the TV show Them, which are kind of like imitations of Jordan Peele's style, which are, so I guess still new and subversive to some extent, but they're, only replications of something else. And going back to the studio system. Alrighty. We are kind of running out of time. I don't want to like a minute long. Here, we can watch this for a minute, just so you guys can understand what Strong Black Lead was. It was like this initiative that Netflix had. Let's just see a little bit.
An artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to respect the times, this crucial time in our lives, when everything is so desperate, when every day is a matter of survival. I don't think you can help but be involved. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the time?
Congratulations to the Strong Black Lead team.
Thanks, guys, just for being so supportive of us. It really isn't until Strong Black Lead that I can even...
Admittedly, when I try to look up Strong Black Lead now and try to find anything, I do get a couple of like BLM links, but it is mostly this shopping page, which has hoodies and like sweatshirts and whatnot. Next one. Also on streaming platforms, something that was really interesting to me was the Welcome to Barbie Land banner that they had. It kind of covered Max Pink. They had this ASL version of Barbie, which has an ASL interpreter at the bottom. If people don't really know about ASL, I guess the emotions and the way that you that you emote physically is very important to, I guess, the conversation. So even something like subtitles that might be lost, and so something like ASL brings that into the movie for those viewers. And Apple TV Plus is going to be having this special called Welcome Home Franklin. Me and my dad used to watch the Thanksgiving special all the time for Peanuts, and he recently mentioned to me that Franklin was on like one side of the table all by himself, and the trailer for it, which it's coming out this month, and push for Black History Month. What's it called? They do like invite him onto the other side of the table, and it's kind of this whole special about him and how he gets become part of the neighborhood. And so I guess I was really curious about what we think. I probably only have time to ask like one, two people. If we think that this is performative, or if we think that this is special, if this actually does like reach us, and if this affects us. Yeah, Ryan.
Okay, I'm gonna make this super quick, less than 60 seconds. I'm biased. As a Black viewer, I like Franklin very much. I like the fact that when it comes to the relationship between him, Charlie Brown, Lucy, and all the rest of them, it's like they're one of the guys. But I can also see the argument where it's just like, oh, they don't see race. And that could go a good thing or a bad thing. It's just like, good thing. They won't really see the appeal of racism. They're just like, they're just kids. They're not going to understand racism. So why do they got to understand it? But also, second thing, they're going to have to understand, they're going to have to understand racism. So when they get older, they don't say anything ignorant or make Franklin feel uncomfortable. So part of me wants the special to go through maybe a small hint of it where the kids can understand it, and Charlie Brown could be like, well, why would anyone want to bother Franklin? I mean, Franklin's just a guy. Just I don't know. It can go both ways, but I'm very glad that Franklin is being included, and he has his own little special. I'm surprised that he has his own special. I was suspecting Peppermint Patty before him, if anything. Probably little redheaded girl. I don't know, but Franklin. I guess Franklin's up next.
Yeah, I definitely think that you match a lot of the two feelings, the two opposing feelings that I feel about all these kind of advertisements and these marketing pushes. I mean, they're definitely, I guess they can look kind of facey. They can seem very surface level, but I guess it's going to really be about the content of it if they're doing them well. I think something like Strong Black Lead for Netflix, was kind of petered out, and so we saw that there, wasn't as much support. But if Max can keep up support, past stuff like this, and Apple TV Plus can do stuff past this, then I think that maybe we can, think that they are benevolent. I'm going to talk about some incentives to having diversity in films. Oscars, it's become a part of the Oscar nomination eligibility. They now have to meet certain criteria to even be nominated. And there are a couple states that give different tax credits incentives to having a diverse crew. So I do want to try to get to everything. These are a couple of nonprofits who support diversity in the media. Respectability is a nonprofit that's about disability. I really wanted to try to show you guys some of these web pages. So I'm kind of disappointed that I'm running out of time. Let me see.
No, I think you're only sharing the
Oh,
slideshow.
I know. Sorry. I was trying to process what I wanted to do.
All good.
Alrighty. What I actually do want to show you guys. There was this pretty interesting UNC Annenberg. There was this USC Annenberg inclusive initiative list of, I guess, the top 100 inclusive movies based off of their calculations. It's based off of a quantification of the diversity of the crew and diversity of the cast, and they kind of push it out into this number. And what's it called? It's definitely interesting. I wanted to hear some thoughts about what we thought about the quantification of diversity and all of this. But I think that it's, at least something interesting for you guys to know about, even if we don't really get to talk about it. And just kind of viewing about, if we think that we should count diversity like this, if this is the best way towards it, if not, what else we can do, because a lot of these movies are, movies that I haven't seen, I don't really know much about, I know are, aren't critically acclaimed. And so I think there's talk about there.
I guess maybe you don't know this, but not that I know it, but I'm gonna ask a question anyway.
Absolutely.
Is like you just showing the diversity score there. Like, does that also include like diversity is not just limited to here's this box of TV that I've seen and there are X number of people. Like, does it also factor into account like historical context of like how many films and TV shows have been made with a not diverse cast? You know what I mean? Like,
oh, okay, got you.
is
What's
that
it called?
something that should
So
also be considered into the score? And I mean, I feel like yes, but how do you like
in
how do you even quantify that? You know?
Yeah, what's it called? So the one limit of the list that I wasn't speaking about was that it's based of only 2019 films from 2019 to 2022.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a pretty so it's pretty limited in
Tiny.
even its scope too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's it called? But let me go into some of these other nonprofits before I have to let you guys go. Storyline Partners is a liaison for a bunch of different I guess experts on different diverse needs, and so they do a lot of consulting. They'll basically match a film with or like the pre-production needs to an expert in that field. And then Women in Film, excuse me, is celebrating 50 years, and they support women, trans folk, queer people, and they have a lot of fellowship opportunities. A lot of them just did end in January. Applications for them, but they do have opportunities to look more. I do recommend going to their websites. I do apologize for running so late on time or running so short on time.
Well, it happens. That means this is engaging. It's excellent.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you. I do want to. I want to try to figure out where I want to leave you guys best, because what's it called? One of the things I've always disliked about diversity meetings is feeling like I just got dumped with a lot of information. I'm like, what do I do from here? I guess very generally, I want to tell you guys to just create and be inspired. All people, regardless of your identity or what you think that your identity is, or if you should be limited in it. I think you should seek to create diverse content and shape content that impacts you, and and do it to fail. Find people who will tell you the truth about it and who you feel comfortable asking those tough questions to. And I think definitely study outside of film. Don't just look towards film. What's it called? I put this comic that I've been reading recently, Saga, that deals a lot with diversity, and that's been a huge inspiration for me. Here are some films that I really enjoyed and are diverse. And I guess I want to leave you guys with I guess some of these resources instead. Verily Bitchy is this YouTube video essayist who I really like. They are a trans bi creator, and they deal a lot with trans bi issues in film and media. They have this really interesting video essay about feminism and Barbie and how it may only cater towards feminism for one people as opposed to matching the intersectionality in it. The Take is this YouTube channel that definitely deals a lot in tropes and has been very helpful in me learning kind of like basic education on patterns that we see in films. Watching Race is a book by Herman Gray that I honestly have not read, but some of his ideas of Black representation in sitcoms did influence my video essay. The USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative and UCLA are what I was referencing a lot of the studies from. And the big conversation, Complicating Diversity, is this panel that was hosted at Sundance last year. I asked a question in it around like the 40-minute mark, so y'all can hear that. But it does have some diverse people talking, and I think it's extra important to hear other diverse creators speaking about their paths and how they view certain issues within the industry. But yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for your time. I apologize for rushing through it at the end,
I
but I do
think
appreciate it.
before you wrap, I just
Yeah.
want to say if you can stop screen sharing if you want.
Oh, certainly. Oh, yeah.
But I just want you to have like one last chance to mention how important Sundance has been to so many people who've gone there. I think in your cohort who went, at least 2 of you came back and completely changed the way they approach filmmaking and telling their own story. So I think you've hit on Sundance a lot in here, but I didn't know if you had one last thing you wanted to say about Sundance and how diverse it is and how they celebrate filmmakers.
Certainly.
It's like their initiative, basically, and that you can all go volunteer there.
Yeah,
and
what's it
see
called?
all the movies.
Yeah, after Sundance, I definitely felt very embarrassed talking about it. I didn't like really mentioning it to people. But oh my gosh, I think just the different types of stories that I engaged with there, just movies that I never would have even existed. There was one movie that is in the list, Mama Cruz, that's about this like older woman who finds her sexuality, and it's in Spanish, and it's just it's so funny. But what's it called? And there was always this the disclaimer for it being on ancestral land beforehand. The entire just energy of Sundance was always just about like telling unique new stories. And I think so many people were just aware that like diverse stories haven't been told or haven't been given the opportunity to be told on in mass. And being able to like empower so many people and like show them off, like it gives you so much like a broader view of art. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Josh, for this whole thing. I encourage you all to go back to the link to watch his video essay if you haven't already. And we can always continue this conversation another time. There's so much to talk about. So, Josh, if you have like 40 minutes more, we can totally come up with a part 2 sometime.
We'll see.
In a year. How about that? You'll review 2024.
Anything for you, Shayna.
See if we did any better.